Steady. Steady. Fuck! Well, I'd better get out of this icy water before I freeze to death.
Holy shit! Your face is gonna be spread over the ground, Batman.
When Arkham Asylum was first released back in 2009, I ignorantly overlooked it, thinking that it would be just like any other superhero game on the market. Namely, shit. However, my curious nature soon got the better of me, and when I took it home and played it, I was taken by complete surprise, as it was the best superhero game I had ever played. And now, 2 years later, Rocksteady have released the heavily anticipated sequel, Batman Arkham City. Does it live up to the standards set by its predecessor? Does it fall short? Or does it set an entirely new standard? Let's find out. Arkham City takes place a year after the events of Arkham Asylum. Quincy Sharp, the warden of Arkham Asylum, has taken credit for Batman's efforts and has become the mayor of Gotham City. He uses his newfound powers to shut down both Arkham Asylum and Blackgate Prison, throwing the inmates from both facilities into a cordoned-off area of Gotham known as Arkham City, Gotham's new city-sized prison. Bruce Wayne publicly scorns the facility and declares his intention to shut it down when he is captured and thrown in there himself. Here he encounters Hugo Strange, warden of Arkham City. Strange explains to Bruce that he knows that he is Batman and that he will reveal it to the people of Gotham if he interferes with Protocol 10, which he intends to launch in several hours. Upon entering the city, Bruce is attacked by several inmates, including the Penguin.
Lights out, rich boy.
After fighting off Penguin and his cronies, Dick, Bruce contacts Alfred, takes to the rooftop, puts on his batsuit and prepares to stick around and learn more about Protocol 10. And that's the general premise, ladies and gentlemen, and let me tell you that the story throughout Arkham City is fantastic. It hooked me right from the very beginning of the game and held my interest throughout its entirety. The sense of mystery and the resulting intrigue is enough to keep you playing for hours. And the character development was great, and thus I found myself genuinely caring about and empathising for the Dark Knight and even the Joker to an extent, who of course returns as Batman's primary nuisance.
Protocol 10? Never heard of it.
As well as the Joker, there are several other well-known Gotham villains serving a role in either the overarching plot or the dozen side quests and associated subplots sprinkled throughout the city. For the most part, each villain has been implemented into the narrative excellently, and they therefore feel like an essential part of the story rather than meaningless filler. That being said, there were some villains that I felt could have been more fleshed out. Some significant Batman villains had appearances that were no more than minor cameos, and it would have been great to see and learn more about them. Take Two-Face for example. Granted, this is only a minor complaint, as I can understand that they may not have worked well enough into the story. And minor setbacks aside, Arkham City's story is truly an engrossing tale that will have you glued to your controller.
Ropey man!
I'm Batman, bitch! Batman Arkham Asylum contains a great blend of sandbox, beat 'em up, puzzle solving, platforming and stealth action game types. You are literally given the entire city to explore right from the very beginning, and as you progress through the game you are able to undergo a variety of side missions at your leisure. The story missions themselves are varied, unique and most importantly enjoyable, and the same can be said about pretty much all of the side missions. Due to the variety across mission types, both story and side, I always felt like I was doing something new every time I played. By keeping things fresh and changing things up like this, Batman Arkham City steers well clear of becoming even mildly repetitive. Of course, as aforementioned, when you're not undergoing any particular quest, you have an entire city to explore. This, to me, is where the game really nailed the feeling of being in the suit of the Dark Knight. Throughout Arkham City, there are crimes in progress to prevent, hapless thugs to beat up on, Riddler trophies to find, riddles to solve, and key locations to explore. Getting around is also a treat thanks to Batman's improved gliding abilities. Not only can you glide through the air as you could in the first installment, but now Batman can dive towards the ground at extreme speeds, either slamming into enemies below or pulling up and using the gained momentum to hastily move around the city. Combine that with a long-range grappling zipline and you'll soon find yourself covering the entire length of the city without even touching the ground. Right from the start, Batman has pretty much all of the gadgets that players acquired from Arkham Asylum, and as the game progresses, more become available that can be used not only in platforming, navigation and puzzle solving, but also in combat and stealth situations as well. And when it's time to throw down, Arkham City delivers with the same excellent combat system used in Arkham Asylum with a bunch of improvements to boot. Batman fights a lot more aggressively this time around. utilising some impressive special moves, the ability to counterattack multiple enemies at once, and he even breaks a few bones. Batman can also seamlessly use many of his acquired gadgets offensively in the midst of a fight through the implementation of an easy-to-use hotkey system. By timing your attacks well, reading your enemy's movements, and using gadgets like Explosive Gel, the Batclaw, and Batarang strategically, you'll soon be raking in those extremely satisfying 40-hit combos and devilishly smiling when you stumble into a room full of thugs. To make things more challenging, Arkham City contains a variety of enemy types that Batman will face as the game progresses. Thugs with shields, knives, tasers, broken bottles, and firearms will be thrown into the mix, as well as goons with body armor and larger enemies that will take a lot more punishment before going down. The variety of enemies, together with the variety of attacks and gadget combinations, means that you'll be continuously forced to stay on your toes and change up your strategy, making nearly every fight different. Of course, when a full frontal assault is suicide, that's when the game's stealth kicks in. And as in the previous installment, Batman can completely clear a room of armed enemies without even being seen. Except this time round, Batman has a significantly higher number of cool takedowns in his arsenal. These include, but aren't limited to, double takedowns, ledge takedowns, wall takedowns, takedowns from above, and many more. Like in other stealth action games like Splinter Cell or Deus Ex, the takedowns are incredibly satisfying to perform and make you feel like the predator that Batman can be. And as in combat, Batman can utilise a variety of acquired gadgets to assist him in being just that predator. Various gadgets can be strategically used to knock down or disorientate enemies, as well as lure them to desired locations. All in all, the predator segments scattered throughout Batman Arkham City were fantastic, and my only complaint is that many of the cooler takedowns are noisy, and therefore, once used, they'll attract attention and alert enemies to your presence. This can be frustrating when you're trying to be discreet, and while I know that some takedowns are completely silent, who wants to repeatedly put enemies into sleeper holds when they can jump out of a grate, grab an unsuspecting enemy, and smash his fucking face into the ground? I mean, come on. As well as hapless thugs, there are several boss battles that players will face throughout Arkham City, and each of them is unique, lengthy, and enjoyable. However, few of them actually prove to be much of a challenge, and I found myself managing to defeat each one without the need for trial and error, never really having to try more than once. However, despite this, I will stand by the fact that each boss battle was very clearly thought out and very cleverly put together. As players progress throughout the game, XP is accumulated, which can be spent to acquire upgrades such as damage, resistance, special moves, and gadget upgrades. There are a significantly larger amount of upgrades players can choose from than in Arkham Asylum, and they seem to appeal to different playstyles and skill levels. Detective mode has also been implemented once again, allowing players to keep track of enemies, vantage point, hidden passageways, and items. Although, in Arkham City, I found myself using it less than I did in Arkham Asylum. I would use it to locate enemies, etc., but then switch it back to regular vision so that I could see what directions enemies were facing, as well as any environmental objects that were breaking an enemy's line of sight. Clearly, the developers intended for players to use both types of vision strategically to plan their movements, and by taking this route, players don't spend 75% of their playthroughs in detective mode and are actually able to appreciate the game's visuals and art style. This was a great idea. Catwoman is introduced as a playable character in Arkham City and has her own subplot that takes place at the same time as Batman's and is equally as interesting. She also has a unique, agile and acrobatic fighting style that is completely different from the Dark Knight's. Not only is playing as Catwoman a refreshing change of pace, but her combat style is fucking amazing, and I would even go as far as to say that it's better than fighting as Batman. She uses her whip in lieu of a grappling hook and has no gliding ability like Batman does, so getting around the city takes a bit more getting used to and doesn't feel as fun as to do it as Batman. However, it certainly isn't broken, and I found that her stealthy abilities were also great fun to perform. After the story mode is completed, a new mode called New Game Plus becomes available to players. In a nutshell, it allows the player to replay the game beginning to end with all the previously acquired upgrades intact. The mode also ups the challenge by throwing every enemy variety at you from the very beginning, making them tougher to take down and removing the counter indicator as well, making the game harder in every aspect. As well as New Game Plus, the Riddler's Revenge mode allows players to undergo ranked challenges involving combat or stealth within a range of locations taken from the story mode. Players can rack up high scores via lengthy and varied fighting combos or discreetly clear a room as quickly as possible and then compare how they went against other gamers via online leaderboards, adding a bit of a competitive aspect. And if you're feeling game, you can also tackle Riddler campaigns, which are essentially a variety of back-to-back challenges. Except in each one, you'll need to select a modifier which may either make things easier or significantly harder. Some modifiers include less health, tougher enemies, no counter indicator, regenerating health, one-hit KOs, and more. And the fun in this feature is that you'll need to evaluate the modifiers you have available and tactically apply each one in each challenge, bearing in mind that you can only use a modifier once. All of these post-game features add on a stack of playtime to an already lengthy story campaign, and when you add everything together, you have a game that'll have you playing for hours and hours, likely across weeks and weeks. It's really hard to find much fault in Arkham City's gameplay, but there were a few minor issues that I came across. Firstly, the controls did feel a little bit stiff at first when it came to Batman's movement, both on the ground and in the air. And I found that the camera was a tad problematic on occasion, either being so close to Batman in a fight that I couldn't see the attacking thugs before being hit, or being so far out that the objects in the foreground impeded my line of sight. However, this only happened rarely. The visual presentation throughout Arkham City is fantastic, featuring great attention to detail across the board. The environments are simply stunning and really convey that dark and ominous atmosphere of not only the city, but the entire game as a whole. Arkham City includes several well-known locations of Gotham that many fans of The Dark Knight will recognise. It's clear that the world of Arkham City has been created by people who are passionate about the source material, and the resulting level of detail encourages exploration. Not only are the environments great, but the model detail of every character is brilliant. The game's animation is also fucking awesome, which is especially noticeable in combat, and the frame rate always ran smoothly. The only issues I came across were the slightly longish load times upon death, some rare texture pop-ins, and the game actually froze up on me twice, requiring me to restart my console. Arkham City is accentuated by an epic soundtrack which always kicks in when it needs to, and the Batmanish scores send shivers down your spine. The voice acting was also top notch, with the standouts being Kevin Conroy as Batman, Mark Hamill as the Joker, and voice acting extraordinaire Nolan North delivering a remarkable rendition of the Penguin. The soundtrack and authentic voice acting are definitely amongst the game's strongest assets and really pulled the player into the world of The Dark Knight. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm aware that this review has been very one-sided to the point where one might say that it's practically an ad for Batman Arkham City. But truthfully, this game has so much good crammed into it that players can almost completely disregard the minor flaws, and I just fucking loved it. Batman Arkham City is what every sequel should be, and with an engrossing story, unbelievably good gameplay, and a stunning audio-visual presentation, I would strongly recommend it to not only Batman fans, but pretty much every gamer on the face of the planet.